Welcome back to the Sweet Spot. This week's episode is with Karlyn Green. She is a holistic business coach for women. She is dedicated to empowering ambitious, freedom-seeking women to build thriving businesses without the overwhelm, needless hustle, and inner mean girl running the show. Karlyn guides them through the inner and outer work required to achieve their goals and enjoy the process. She lives in Cleveland, Ohio with her son and 2 pugs. Karlyn loves to travel and meet people all over the world. She is a yogi and instructor. Dark chocolate is a staple in her diet. She takes her New York Times puzzles a little too seriously, and her love language is belly laughs. All in all, Karlyn is a thriving business owner living life on her own terms, and she can't wait for you to join her. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Welcome to the Small Business Sweet Spot. I'm Barb Davids, and I'm here to help you get more website traffic and leads with simple, actionable SEO and content strategies. In each episode, I share tips and tactics and talk with other business owners who help us grow both in our business and in life. I'm so glad you're here. Let's go. Thanks, Karlyn, for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I am great. I am enjoying this cool fall weather. I don't know if it's cool around you at all.
Yeah, it's like 73 here. I'm in Minneapolis at the moment, and I do see like the reds and the yellows coming out of the trees and things.
Fall has always been my favorite season, but I do love summer, so sometimes it's a little bit bittersweet for me.
Yeah. I tend to, so I've been nomading like the last year. So seeing the fall colors is kind of getting my insides like, oh, I gotta go south.
Yeah, I know.
It's time for me to go.
Yeah, I feel that. I think, when my son has graduated, I will probably be more migratory.
Yeah. Actually, this reminds me of a thing that I have. It's still in storage right now, but it's a painting or a print that my dad had given me. And I forget who it's by, but it's kind of like stick figures, but very bright and very colorful.
Mhm.
And it says, and they drove until they didn't have to wear coats anymore. And I was like, man, that's fitting.
Yes, please.
Yeah, crazy. So we are going to talk about networking, and to give the listeners an idea of how we met, we actually met through a networking group, right?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
It's interesting because you reached out to me, and I thought it was very thoughtful of you, and how you reached out to me was very organic feeling. It didn't feel like you were doing it to pressure. It was just simply to get to know me and to see how we could mesh, or if we could mesh, or it was for the true nature of the networking. And I thought you did it so well. And you
Yeah.
had this idea of you had some really great theories on it, and especially around why networking isn't working for people. Maybe I'll start with, what is the thing people think they need to get out of networking?
Wonderful. Yes. Networking is one of those things that, well, let me just backtrack and then I want to answer that question.
Okay.
When I first started this business, the idea of networking made my skin crawl. And that's because in my mind's eye, what I saw was like old men with like the blazers with the elbow patches. I've never even been to one of those networking groups, but I don't know how I knew that that's the way it was.
Yeah.
But you're just like forcing business cards on people. And I was like, yeah, that like, I don't want any part of that. So I think a lot of times people come into networking with a perception of how it is, and also a perception of what it should be. And that's why they avoid it, because of the premise that you go to networking to get anything, right? And when I network, what makes it fun for me, what makes it organic for me, what makes it work for me is this idea of connection, service, and giving. When I start working with women, the biggest fear that most of them have is coming off salesy. They don't want to be pushy. They don't want to be salesy. Now, there's some like baggage underneath that we have to work through, mindset stuff and patriarchal stuff. But aside from that is this idea that you always need to be selling. And when you go into a networking environment, or when you're interacting with other humans, it doesn't make sense to always be selling. And that's why it feels icky. That's why people avoid networking and feel like, they don't want to go there because, who would want to do that, right? So when you go to network, when I go to network, my approach is going in and seeing who can I connect with, listening for what they need, and beyond me, how can I help them? sometimes organically it comes out that yes, it would work well for them and for me for us to work together in some way. But oftentimes it's more so like, oh, you need to meet this person,
Mm.
you know, or like, oh, I have this resource that will help you where you're at in your game, you know. And what that has done for me is it has, you know, they say like a rising tide, right, lifts all the ships. And it's just, that's how I feel. Like I have people who refer people to me or send me cool articles and vice versa. So yeah, I think the baseline is forget about getting anything out of networking and focusing on what you can contribute and how you can serve. When you become an entrepreneur, and everybody knows this intuitively or just straight up, but it becomes a fast track to self-development.
Mm.
And you really are all of a sudden confronting your insecurities and your hangups because you are the one that's on the hook for everything. And that can feel freeing and it can also feel really confining depending on your mindset. And so when you are coming from a place of needing your business to work and needing to make sales, all of your interactions with people then are painted in that light.
Mm.
And so when you feel like you need, like, if I'm going to go to this networking, I have to make sure it's not a waste of my time, right? If you go into that networking event and that's your perspective, you're not going to feel good and your interactions won't feel genuine. You both people on either side of that exchange will feel that. And so it comes back to like you, right? It always comes back to the identity we carry with us and our perceptions of the world and how we move through it, our self-concept. And so if I am always operating from how, like, I have to get a sale, I need to make this work for me, I don't want to waste my time, I kind of end up wasting my time because I'm so worried about not wasting my time. If that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, I think that's where I fall into it. Not so much that I think I have to get sales out of it. I get it. I didn't 20 years ago, of course. I thought that was all, business card pushing. But back then I was also in corporate, and that's really what it felt like, I think, back in the day. But I think that's where I'm landing right now. And I do understand that it's more of a getting people together and just learning who's out there and kind of, especially now that we don't tend to meet in person as much as we used to still.
Mhm,
And I think the networking is kind of, and because so many people work for themselves as opposed to before years ago, there's
mhm.
no way there's so many groups out there. It is difficult. And so trying to find other people in our areas that we can work with, even if it's in our same thing. But I've looked at it a couple times where I would have, thinking back, I was thinking, oh my God, I got to take out of my time out of my day to do this. And it's not that I necessarily thought I would or wouldn't get sales out of it, but I
Mhm.
think because now that you've said that, I'm kind of examining it. I think it's because I didn't want to waste the time because I didn't quite know what to do with it afterwards.
Mhm. Yes, and that's a really good point that you bring up. When I work with clients or just talk to anybody, networking is the jet fuel. It's the rocket fuel in the beginning.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't want to hear that because you see online, like, oh, I started my business and it just took off because I have an amazing Instagram and X, Y, or Z. And that is the case for some people, sure.
Hmm.
Okay. My philosophy is if you're new at entrepreneurship and you're not excellent at marketing and messaging, on the ground, face to face, heart to heart connection with human beings, whether it's through Zoom or in person, is going to accelerate your growth because you are working through the kinks in real time. And when you're talking to somebody face to face, they're more forgiving of you bumbling over things, right?
Hmm.
They feel your genuine connection. And it's like, but if you're trying to like make it through into your copy and your marketing, it's going to feel forced and inauthentic
Hmm.
and it's going to be slow. So that's like one of the reasons why I'm like, this is what you want to do. So sometimes when I'm working with clients, when they go to network and then, then they come back and it's like, well, that was great. I talked to a lot of people and I'm like, well, okay. I mean, if I was to say what you should get out of a networking event is connection. I don't mean interaction.
Mm.
We can go out and interact with anybody. But when I go into a networking event, I always set a little goal for myself that I'm going to find 3 people that I genuinely want to follow up with afterwards. Right. And that doesn't mean that I want to turn them into a client. It's just that I want to extend this relationship beyond this one little container within which I met them. And
Mhm.
that's how you build your business, because business is built on relationships. If
Mhm.
you're in the service-based industry, and just any industry really, but especially if you're in services, you meeting more humans is going to benefit your business, and it's going to benefit you. You have so much to learn. So if you just go into a networking event and you just interact, you walk away wondering like, oh, did I waste my time? Yeah, you sure did. But if you go in with the intention of like genuine connection and saying like, hey, I'd love to follow up with you, X, Y, or Z, you'll see how fruitful it can be.
Okay. Do you feel like that is the main reason that people feel their networking isn't working, or are there other reasons?
Yeah, it all stems from that self concept around wanting to get something, right? This idea that you need to, a little bit of scarcity, and then being stuck in your head with insecurity, right?
Mm.
So oftentimes, people, I don't know what to say or what I have to offer. And if we actually just step back from that and got out a little whiteboard, we can bullet point out many things, and anybody has to offer. The mistake you make is that it always has to be something that has to do with what you're doing for vocation, right? What your
Mm.
business is. And it's not always that. Sometimes you connect with somebody, oh, this, like, for instance, I'll give you great examples. I was on a networking call talking about a win I had, which was that I realized all of the things I had on my vision board last year. I just like kind of like stepped back. I was like, oh wait, I have all those things. And I had walked through one of the most challenging chapters of my life, which was divorce and moving out and becoming a single mom. And so I was sharing all that. Genuinely, somebody followed up with me afterwards because he was going through that.
Mm.
So it's not always going to be like, I do XYZ, you do XYZ. We're going to service each other, very robotically. It's like, no, you be a human and connect with real humans, and you'll flourish. So yeah, I would say the number one reason why it's not effective is not having a plan and listening to what I call your inner mean girl too much, and going in and operating, in an inauthentic way, which a lot of times might be just baggage from your past that you need to work through.
Mm. So let me go into this now because I feel like I get pretty tired of always having to be quote on when
Mm.
I do networking or if I meet with somebody new, even if it's over video. Sometimes, well, lately it's been in coffee shops sometimes because I've had connections around some of the places I've been staying. So I finally got to meet people in person for the first time, which was
Mhm.
really cool. But how do we, because I feel like lately there was a spurt when I would try to get into a bunch of groups and like try to be active and like, okay, I'm going to do this today. Like I'm actually going to try and spend so much time on this particular method, which was going into different groups that were online to see if I could help and just answer questions. And it wasn't even questions that had to do with my thing. They always have prompts in these groups and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I was like, done. Like, I'm just so tired of doing that, and so I got exhausted from, like, trying to to do the thing. How do you suggest people do it so that they do it in a way that doesn't burn you out?
That's a great question. And I've been there, so we all go through that. The most effective approach is keeping track of what's working and what's not. And it can be basically like a pulse check if you're able to be really honest. You can also just have a little spreadsheet or a piece of paper, you know, and just like, here's what I did where, here's some connections I've made, here's what's come out of it, here's what's working, here's what's not working. You don't have to be, everything to everybody everywhere all at once,
Mhm.
right? This ever present, marketing that we hear. especially when you're a solopreneur, it's like, it's impossible unless you have lots of money to throw at that, and it
Mhm.
will burn you out. So you want to be selective about where you're investing your energy and your time. And
Mhm.
so the way that I am selective is through trial and error and keeping track. Like, okay, like here, I'm getting genuine connections from this group that I really like. So I'm going to stay here. And other places that feels kind of forced, right? It feels like maybe it's a mismatch. So I
Mhm.
just get out of there. No harm, no foul. It might be great for somebody else. One of the best ways to help, like, do some pre-filtering for you is paid groups. And
Mm.
the reason why that is because you're putting yourself in a space where people have already said that they believe so much in their business that they're investing in it. So now it's kind of like a higher tier of people in the entrepreneurial journey, you
Mhm.
know, people in the space that you're in, especially if you're helping. Okay. But even any other like service based business. So, say you're a life coach of some sort, or maybe even a therapist, or, whatever it might be, people who have already paid for self development, they're already showing you that they're just kind of like a little bit further along in that client journey. It's going to be easier to make those connections when you talk, and they will be more apt to want to opt in with you or at least collaborate with you in some way.
Mm. I like that suggestion. That's a really good one. You also talked about you do something called the giving hour. Can you share that with me again?
Yeah. Yes. So this is something that I made up, but it's based off of the book The Go Giver. Have you ever read that?
I haven't. I'm gonna put that on my list.
Yeah.
I always
It's
like books like that, like business
yeah.
books.
It's a fun read. It's a fictional story that two guys wrote together. So it's kind of funny to me
Okay.
that to imagine that let's write this fictional. The whole like scenario just kind of makes me laugh. But the ethos behind it, the philosophy, I really like. And it just really was in tune with my approach and my perspective on business. So it's a wonderful read for any listeners. But basically, instead of focusing on what we can get out of the world, focus on what we can contribute to the world.
Mm.
And by doing so, you're never really going to have to worry, right? You're especially like, now, this is not to say you're not charging for your stuff, people. It's focusing on like, hey, I met Andrea and she is looking for so and so kind of clients. And I know this person actually works with those same kind of people. I'm going to connect them. And you're actually not getting anything out of it. Nothing. There's actually this book that I want to read that was mentioned, and I'll send you the link afterwards, but it's all about social capital. And that's like how businesses thrive, but also how humans thrive in general. And so I'm like, oh, yeah, that really makes sense. But you can also look at it energetically if you're really into manifesting and all these things. It's like just focus on the energy you give, and then you're going to get that same energy back. Sure. So the giving hour for me is when I'm networking with people, what I try to do, I don't do this perfectly. What you'll learn about me is I am very imperfect and I'm okay with it. And I also encourage my clients to be that way too. So this is something that I do. I do it imperfectly, meaning sometimes I miss people or I don't do it a week or maybe even 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh yeah, and I get back to it. What it is I kind of take notes. I always take notes when I'm on a networking call virtually. And then, or afterwards, I try to make a little note after if I'm physically with people because it would be, what's maybe, I don't know. And then for my giving hour, I go back and I reflect on, who they are, who their ideal client is, if that's the case, what or where are they at in their journey? How can I support them in some way? And like I mentioned earlier, it's not always going to be a business related topic. Sometimes somebody mentions something that has to do with life, you know, and I'll say, oh, I'll send them a link to an article or a book that I've read or a podcast that I love or whatever it is. And honestly, it's just about continuing that relationship and nurturing those people, because we forget that like it's humans and that's humanity, you know? And I keep thinking about this. This is a little side tangent about like AI
Okay.
and where that's going and how cold it feels. And I also this shift in my industry and in sales in general to have more of a human touch again.
Mm.
And I don't think that's by coincidence. People don't want to interact with robots, right? Unless it legitimately moves it fixes their problem faster, right? But it's like, I would like, when I go to the grocery store, I want to self checkout, you know, I want to do the ding, 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 get out, right? But if it makes my life harder, I want to talk to a human who can move through it faster. If anybody can relate to when you're on the phone with a service based, you know, whatever, you're like, oh, some phone business. I just have this story in my mind. And it's a robot that's helping you and it's infuriating. And I know like I've screamed human, like
Yeah.
human multiple times
All right.
because it's so cold. It's not helpful. It's ineffective, you know? And so the giving hour is just all about like putting the humanity back in what you're doing and remembering that who you serve on the other end of that is a human or human beings. And when you reflect back to them that you see that, that's going to bring so much back to you in ways that you won't quite get to see like how it does, but it does. It always builds up your sales and your genuine like fulfillment.
And it kind of reminds me of the idea of treat others as you would want to be treated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But people feel like that's the thing that if anybody, the one thing that I would hope that everybody walk away with today is you actually know how to sell. You do. You are selling all the time. You are selling where you want to go for dinner to your friends. You are selling, you know, the shirt that you want your partner to wear. You are selling whatever it is that you're angling for because you believe in it, you sell. You are exchanging somebody's time for something or somebody's belief in something, somebody opt in. You have these innate abilities, but when it comes to business, everybody forgets. And oh, there's money exchange, and then there's imposter syndrome, right? So it's like you start to like act like a little robot. And if you can go back to like, how do you like to be sold to? And think about experiences you've had in the past that you liked and ones that you didn't like. We always remember the ones we didn't like. But think about ones that you have where, you know, you felt like the person wasn't too eager for you to buy. You were you walk into some department store and he just says, hey, I'm here if you need me. And then you're like, actually, I do have a question. And then they go above and beyond to help you. You know?
Yeah.
Things like that. We have those experiences in our lives. So it's like a little bit of remembering that you actually do have these innate abilities through connection and service and your actual belief in what you're hoping they opt into, but also in your general conversation, in your general experience with people selling to you, you have a whole bank of ideas of how it can be done in a way that is enjoyable for people.
If somebody wanted to, if they haven't gone down the networking route yet, or maybe they're revisiting it, what do you suggest they do for outside of the mindset piece, like logistically, what's the best way to get started?
Yeah. So a good old fashioned Google search is a wonderful way.
And what do they search for?
Networking groups in my area, or if you specifically only want to network with women, for instance, women's networking groups. Every city has one. You might have a really small town and you have to drive to a bigger one. Fine.
Yeah.
If you want to do it in person.
Yeah.
But just go on Eventbrite and look up networking groups or women's networking groups or networking for, young professionals. And if you are open to it, you could go to one every day of the week if you wanted to, you know.
Mm,
I've ended up in networking groups that have a local presence across the country, but then they also have this online thing. So I'm like, I'm tuning in from Cleveland and it's really funny, you know.
mhm.
But and then that, you know, people actually enjoy that. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, why are you here? I'm like, well, I prioritize, you know,
Yeah.
and then we just laugh that I'm not local. But yeah, it's a Google search, an Eventbrite search, a Facebook search, you know.
Okay.
I'll say this with the how to around that. If I always say this with almost any how to, is if I told you, if you go to 4 networking groups this month, I'll give you $10,000, right? And I'll give you a little extra homework, and you walked away with 3 genuine connections from each, right? So there's the homework. 4 networking groups, 3 genuine connections from each that you're going to follow up with. I'll give
Okay.
you $10,000. Would you figure it out?
Mm,
Right? Every time the answer is yes.
mm,
So if people follow me after this, what you'll hear me say oftentimes is it's very rarely an information problem or a how-to problem. It's a who to be problem. Who am I being in this situation?
mm.
I truly believe that this is something that could work for me. You know, I'm going to get $10,000 out of it. What are the steps that I'm going to take? Right?
Sure. Mhm.
Because we figure other things out really easily, you
Yeah.
know? And so, and this is not to like insult anybody,
Yeah.
right? It's just like an insightful thing that when we go to that, like, how would I even start? Like, take a step back and ask yourself who you're being in that moment, right?
Mm.
Of course, I'll give you some insight and like ways to make it a little quicker for yourself. And here's what I do for sure. But also remember that you are a very resourceful human.
Do you have any horror stories or, like, tips to not get in some, like, crappy situations or, like, the underbelly of the networking world?
Ah, yes. I will say one of the experiences that just felt like icky to me was, you know, being sold one thing and them delivering something else. And that
Mm,
was
it
like
is bad.
a networking holiday party for women business owners.
Okay.
Oh, cool. That sounds great. We're going to go, we're going to listen to funny music and connect. Well, it turned out to be a, a sales pitch for
Mm,
this local business coach. Fine, I don't care if you're a business coach, wonderful for you. But it would just felt like we were trapped, you know,
yeah.
because it just became all of a sudden we were in, you know, it would be weird if you got up and walked out. And it was to me just like it just doesn't align with who I am.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend and what I've done since is just kind of do a little bit of homework about what it is and how it's ran, you know.
Mm,
And if it is just a networking thing, wonderful. If it sounds like it all and sniffs like it all like it's going to be a sales pitch and you don't want that, don't go. If you're open to it, fine. Who cares? I think plenty of the people there were fine with it, but
right.
not me. And I know a handful of other people. So
Yeah.
really that's been the only thing.
Okay.
Yeah, the biggest thing is that the last thing I will say is just be mindful of who your ideal client is, right? So to have effective marketing where you're not wasting your time, you need to go the extra mile to connect with people and follow up and be of service. But also, you don't want to be selling hot dogs at a vegan convention, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
like if your ideal client is, you know, a luxury person, like somebody who opts into luxury and blah, 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 like you want to find a space where those people are
Mhm.
and network. The last thing that I haven't mentioned, or not the last thing, but one thing I haven't mentioned that is critical to this conversation is it doesn't always have to be a quote unquote networking group.
Mm,
Okay. So you
okay.
can work wherever you are, being of service wherever you are, but it can be any place where humans are gathered. So if your people are like wellness people, you know, and they're always thinking about how can I like, you know, evolve in my wellness all the time, you know. So you might go to yoga workshops. You might go to, you know, some sort of, you know, women's circle. I don't know. There's like all sorts of things where you can have genuine connection with human beings. The reason why people don't think about those is when they have their blinders on, is it has to be about business, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And if you remember that that's actually not what it is, and you're just meeting people, the horizon's open.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, is there anything else? I'm glad you mentioned that piece, like that you had that extra one. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on yet that you would like to around networking, giving hour, that sort of thing?
I will say this: the fastest way to learn anything is through immersion, and everybody resists it. That's
Yeah,
normal because it doesn't feel good,
yeah,
right? It's just
yeah.
like gonna fumble. And I remember the first time I said to somebody when I was meeting them that I was a coach, it really kind of came out as like a peep, I think. And, my voice was like, like, because I had my previous business before that, and that was my identity. I'm a landscape designer, and I have a landscaping company, and I could say that all day, every day, super easy. And all of
Mhm.
a sudden, I'm a business coach for women. Who the hell do I think I am? You know? And so, but I couldn't get to where I am today without having first done that,
Mhm.
right? I couldn't speak so clearly about what I do without having fumbled it a gazillion times, right? But
Mhm.
like I said earlier, when you're actually speaking to human beings, people are more forgiving. But but what I wanted to say is that just be willing to get it wrong, you
Mm.
know? Like the more willing you are to just try and be awkward and get it wrong, the faster you're going to get it right, right? That's how you learn a language. The
Mhm.
faster you're going to make genuine connection, the faster you'll grow your business. So just
Yeah.
remember, everybody started somewhere. You have to start where you are.
Yeah. It's a great piece of advice. Okay, so out of all that, I know you said that it kind of sounded like a takeaway, but I'll just ask it again to see if there is any other takeaway in particular, like the one thing that if they had to walk away from this episode, what do you hope they walk away with?
I would say you don't have to overdo it. You don't have to be everywhere all at once. You don't have to be anybody but yourself. And and make sure like you are being mindful of how you talk to yourself about
Mm.
it. That's, kind of like what I just said. I can't remember what I said earlier. This is the one thing that I want you to take away. I know it was very important. But like the most important thing in general and all that I do is who you are being in the world and how you see yourself moving through the world is going to be the game changer all the time. And so
Mm.
like there's I don't know if you're familiar with Susan Hyatt, that coach.
Mm.
She's been around for a long time, but she has a
Okay.
new level, when you're going to achieve a new level and then you're going to get to another point of resistance because growth comes through resistance. And the answer, yes, you want to surround yourself with experts, you want to learn from the best and so that you can shorten the distance, between 2 points. Absolutely. But always before that is who you are being,
Mm.
how you approach the situation each time. And so be very mindful of like what you're cultivating internally, right? I call it your mindset hygiene. It's as important as your physical hygiene.
Yeah, I love that. All right. And if somebody wants to explore more around the idea of getting some help in the mindset area, networking, and they're just really excited about what you had to say, what's the best way that they can reach you?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. And I would love to connect with anybody, even if it's just for a conversation, just to remind
Just for that connection, right?
people. Yeah, yeah.
I
So
love it.
you can find me on Instagram at Dear Wildheart with an underscore in between. So it's DEAR and then Wildheart. And then I have dearwildheart.com or Karlyn at dearwildheart.com. Any of those is fine.
Right.
But I also have just kind of playing off of what I was talking about with who you are being in the world, how you talk to yourself, and new level, new double. I hosted a 3-day virtual retreat around your identity
Mm.
and the shift that is your shift that is required. It's not always going to be the same for everybody, but where are you at right now? Who do you need to become to be the woman who is creating X results. And it is, I call it a retreat because there's a lot of reflection going on. And we also, there's some homework that you get, but it is magical. And when you walk out of it, you walk out like knowing you are the person who creates these things. And just like I said earlier, like, yeah, sure, I'll help you with the points. But if you are coming from the place of, I'm the person who figures things out and I get things done, you're going to find the solution a lot faster. So I will give that link to you. I highly recommend people explore that if you liked anything I had to say. And that's actually the first segment of the new business mastermind that I have for women who are, working for their first or next 6 figures in business.
Okay.
So if you go and you opt into that, you're already like a quarter way into work.
There you go. One step ahead.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Karlyn, for spending the time and sharing that with us. I really appreciate you and the information. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me. It's always a treat to talk to you.
All right. And that wraps up this episode. Stay tuned for more episodes to help your business thrive online. We'll see you in the next sweet spot. Cheers. Thank you for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're looking for SEO and content marketing help, you can find all kinds of information at compassdigitalstrategies.com. And if you like the episode, please tell a friend. Cheers.